Make It Right, the manufacturing podcast.
The promise of Industry 4.0 is better data, better decisions, better profits, better products, and better services. But things are changing rapidly, and there's a lot going on. How do you get started down the path of Industry 4.0 or IIoT, the Industrial Internet of Things? And how do you ensure the security of your connected manufacturing businesses? This week on the show, we talk about the future, the near, and the far with my guest, Greg Orloff. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at IIoT World. It's the first global digital publication dedicated 100% to connected industry, industrial Internet of Things, and Industry 4.0. Greg's been on the road for the last couple of weeks. He's probably seen some fantastic things I haven't even heard about yet. So, Greg, thank you for joining me on the show. I'm excited for our conversation.
Oh, thank you, Janet. I'm excited as well. Nothing like a couple road trips to spur the creativity of one's mind's eye. So happy to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that you've been on your travels, and even prior to that, I'm sure that you have seen a lot of interesting technologies that haven't probably even seen the light of day yet. But what are some of the technologies, or are there technologies out there that are coming to manufacturing that are really getting you excited?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Janet. I think the short answer is yes. There's a tremendous amount of technology out there. A lot of it depends on what your perspective is. I mean, IIoT World, we focus on the industrial side of things, but that's a pretty wide open and nebulous topic. So we, to drill it down for your folks and your listeners, we tend to look at anything ranging from healthcare to traditional industrial control systems or ICS technologies. SCADA, the next generation beyond that, data acquisition. But then we also move into transportation, artificial intelligence, power generation. So we cover a wide gambit of different topics in that quote, quote, industrial side of things. But to answer your question, I think there's opportunity across a lot of these different spectrums. So I've seen things from a biomimicry standpoint they're getting me excited. I think there's a lot going on in the robotics areas. The raw sensor areas is another that we can talk about as well. So feel free to pick away, and I will answer questions as you best see fit.
Okay, so I think probably one of the areas that I would like to start on is there are like challenges and fears associated with this latest industrial revolution, which there probably were with the last ones too, right? But the goal and the promise of IoT is that it's going to enable smart factories to dramatically optimize operations by making them able to adjust suddenly to changes in orders, et cetera. But the connectivity raises some security questions. And you wrote that there's this charter of trust initiative that Siemens has launched to address this. And you were writing about this and tweeting about it back in January. So give me an idea of what this charter of trust is all about, what it encompasses, and you know what you think the impact could be on security and manufacturing going forward.
Sure. No, happy to comment. Well, I think if I take the concept of trust and you boil that down into layman's terms, what does it mean? I mean, you say, I trust a person, I trust someone, I trust an organization. What does that truly mean? You're putting your faith that they have your best interests at heart. You've dealt with them in the past, so you know that they're looking out for your goodwill. I think there's a lot of different ways you can describe what trust means. But to your point, Janet, when you embark on any type of a digitization effort, you're opening up an organization, right? You can't deny that. You're tying yourself into the Borg, so to speak, for the Trekkies that are out there. And I think in the manufacturing sector and some of the other areas, there's an apprehension and to do that, and rightly so on multiple fronts. When you hear about some of the there's say catastrophes or incidents that have come up where people have hacked in and ascertained someone's data or information about clients or the company in general. Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder, it makes you question. So I think at a high level, what Siemens, who initiated the initiative, did is they said, look, they fundamentally, our clients, our stakeholders, the people that we influence globally, they need to trust us. And if we're making products that are making their lives better, and arguably that's exactly what they're doing, amongst the other 15 players, I think there's 16 in total now that have signed on to this charter, how are we going to commit to these people that entrust in us to have their best interests at heart, how do we commit to them that we're going to do that? And that's at a high level, I think that was the intent of the Charter of Trust. So it was a pact, if you will. It was initiated by those folks. And Siemens they're not a new organization, right? They've been around for over 170 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they broke it down into 10 different criteria, I guess you would say, of what does it mean, for someone to be a member of the Charter of Trust, or what is that commitment to organizations that are out there? And it's basically they're committing to ownership of the reality that they're being entrusted with your data, you being the client, whomever you are, whether you're a company that's utilizing their sensors, their equipment, their platforms. All of the organizations that are part of that are basically pledging their commitment to you that they're going to do the best that they can to ensure a baseline level of safety and protection around that information. So that's in my best attempt at layman's terms of what the intent of the charter is for. And it's they're trying to gain as much traction as they can in the marketplace for doing that.
Yeah, I guess it's that traction that's going to actually give the charter teeth.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, if I look at it pragmatically, I applaud the effort. I think it makes a lot of sense to take the initiative and to hang it out there, as some folks would say, to make that kind of a commitment. The proof's going to be in the pudding, right? How does this manifest, and how does it keep moving down the line? And so far, I've seen good things out of the effort. I think they're getting a good response out of it. There's been hints of taking it to a higher level, whether it would be incorporated into a standard. I mean, pushed out through any one of the international standards body. Who's to say? But I think there are challenges that are associated with that as well. I mean, you've got a core group that are a member of this charter, and no one has said this door is closed. In fact, they said anyone else that wants to participate can.
Yeah.
So organizations can come forward, and they can throw their hat in the ring and sign up and pledge commitment to it. If it goes into the world of standardization, then that's a world I dealt with in a former life too. There are certain things that are going to have to be met, but they've done a tremendous amount of groundwork to put that straw man or that skeleton in place, that I think it would move through the process
Yeah.
quite well.
Okay. So, I mean, you're out there, you're seeing a lot of really interesting things. Do you think that when people talk about security and like the opportunities that are out there for all of the technology that's there, are manufacturing companies using security as an excuse not to do stuff? Are they concerned about the cost of what implementation will be? What are some of the concerns that you see out there with manufacturing companies about moving forward with IIoT?
Oh, I think you hit on several of them. It's you put on your CEO hat, right? I mean, why do I do this? To me, the fundamental question is always why. And it's not an arms crossed and a begrudgingly sitting from the corner. It's that open conversation. Well, why do we want to do this? So you first have to ask yourself a question from a corporate standpoint. Why do I want to tie myself in? Why do I want to plug in? What's in it for me, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And there's a tremendous amount of things that are in it for you. Now, not to say that every process on the planet needs to be plugged in, but there are benefits. There's predictive maintenance. There's preventative maintenance aspects of this. If you can mitigate failure rates, take any type of a manufacturing process. You folks may be accustomed to. You got a big hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of equipment out there, and if you can predict when a certain piece of that is going to fail and replace that part before it fails, Business 101 tells you that pay me now cost is going to be a heck of a lot less than if that thing has a catastrophic failure, whatever the thing happens to be, whether it's a flux capacitor, or it's a forge or some kind of a stamping operation, or it's something in the chip sector or the semiconductor sector, or a health device. If any one of those products fails in operation as opposed to being taken offline systematically and having that part replaced, there's a huge amount of savings. And that's not even talking about the repercussions of lost production time, lost operational efficiencies, and all that would come along with the failure as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity for organizations to embrace it. Now, when you do that, there is the security aspect of that. So that's another consideration. So that's bucket number 2, if you will. So you need to look at that and say, well, what am I doing now that I have decided to embark on this journey? What am I doing to bridge that gap and mitigate against any potential either internal failures that are not maliciously intended or something that does have a malicious intent, externally or internally? And that's the whole concept of cybersecurity, right? It's how do you thwart those attacks before they happen, or those circumstances before they transpire? So I think there's a lot of activity in that front, from software, from hardware. There's a tremendous amount of organizations and some great things out there from the cyber standpoint as well. It's just figuring out fundamentally, okay, what's the why? Do I do this? Once I figured out my why and I check that box and I say yes, how do I move forward? And then how do I incorporate the right solution for my particular circumstance?
Right.
And I'm talking in vagaries, but I'm talking in vagaries on purpose because to definitively to the point of your question, it's going to depend on the size of the organization, the technical competence of the organization. What do they have in-house in terms of their own wheelhouse and capabilities? You have IT departments in organizations that have been around for decades. You have OT departments that have been around for decades. And, the oil and vinegar don't necessarily mix all the time. That's a concern that's out there, is how do you bridge that gap from an internal communication and making sure that you've got solid fluid control and communication going on between those departments.
So are you saying that for many manufacturers, that maybe getting into this isn't a total transformation? For some, maybe it is, but you can make small adjustments and still be getting huge benefits?
Absolutely. It's by no means, from my humble opinion, an all or nothing type of engagement.
Okay.
And I think you should baby step into it from a practical standpoint. Maybe you pick one process, you pick one department, one operation where it looks like you're going to get the most gain, and you tackle that one first. Do it as a case study. Do it something that's an internal piece. Another concern that we hear coming up a lot of times is circling back to that size of an organization. Resources are finite.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're talking people, money, time, all of that. So smaller organizations, and whether it's a startup or an SME, they don't have multi-million-dollar budgets, right? Some of them barely have a six-figure budget. Some of them are, two ladies and gentlemen in a garage trying to figure out how to put something together with baling wire and duct tape. But that's the world that they live in, right? So where are the products and where are the solutions for those folks? When you, to your point, if you're going to tackle one situation, you may be able to do something with a Raspberry Pi and a couple of sensors that you buy from an electrical surplus that's going to drastically improve your operation. You don't need a six-figure, seven-figure platform implementation that's going to bankrupt a small company to catalyze action and get results.
Yeah. So I guess you start small and you see the results from that, and that result can possibly, if you're lucky, fund your next adjustment.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You'll use it at first kick at the can. It's a learning exercise. And the first one, maybe it doesn't work, but that doesn't mean you quit. Maybe
Right.
try a different one, try a different approach, learn from your mistakes.
Where does collaboration with other companies come into this? Because I think, companies can't do all this on their own. They can't always have the IT department sitting there waiting to do something. So this is where collaboration is going to play a huge role in moving everybody forward. Bring in the expertise so that you can do what you're expert at, correct?
Well, I think there's always a place for that. When you can't be a master of everything, right? And I think there's a certain point where you choose and you pay for someone's expertise, you pay for their skill set, or an organization's expertise and skill set, and you bring that in-house when you need it. You don't have to employ all of the people directly that are going to help you get across the line. And there are a lot of consortiums out there, industry associations. Good Lord, I mean, we live in a day and age of the web, right? I mean, you can access a tremendous amount of information just by poking around in the right neighborhoods online to find those user groups that are doing things similarly, maybe in a different sector. No one wants to jump into bed with a competitor and start peeling back the onion to see what they're doing, there's always an apprehension there. But if you're doing a manufacturing process, is that, I know it's a sweet spot for your audience. If you're making whatever, you're making bicycles and somebody down the street is making, equipment for processing in the beverage industry, I mean, there's not a lot of competition going on there, except for maybe the drink holder on the bike. But that aspect, I mean, you can gain a lot of knowledge from that industry partnerships and just knowledge sharing in general. So I think there's a place for mining those relationships through associations, through good old-fashioned networking, and then there's also a place for bringing in an expert more formally from whether it's a consultant, whether it's an organization that just specializes in that aspect of what you're trying to accomplish.
That's Greg Orloff, the Chief Innovation Officer at IIoT World. They're a digital publication focused on the connected industry, and he brings an interesting perspective to this role. He can view innovation and technology from the perspective of a former entrepreneur and CEO. So next week on the show, we're going to continue discussing security. It is a topic that wove its way through our conversation. We'll also discuss the human role in artificial intelligence, and Greg will share some stories about some of the amazing tech he sees in his role as Chief Innovation Officer. Thanks very much for listening to the Make It Right podcast. To get our latest episodes, you can subscribe through iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, and you can share the show with your friends and colleagues. I'm Janet Eastman. Thanks for listening.